The hogs were screaming again. The sound rolled down the slope just before sunrise, sharp and broken, cutting through the frozen trees like a warning. A squeal like that never meant feeding time. It meant rot. It meant loss. It meant another settler had made a mistake. The winter was now collecting. Martha did not flinch. She was kneeling behind her cabin with her elbows deep in frozen earth, her wool skirt soaked through with melting frost. Her breath rose in pale clouds as she dragged the last flat stone into place, sealing the narrow entrance she had carved into the north-facing slope. The stone fit tight, smooth against the clay and packed soil. When she pressed her weight against it, nothing shifted. No one but her knew how deep it went. Most folks only knew it as the widow's hole. Some called it wasted effort. Others laughed and said it looked like a grave waiting for its owner. Once, a man riding past had tipped his hat and called it the widow's tomb. But Martha had not answered him. She never did. Their laughter had softened since October. Now it came in quiet looks and half-smiles that never lasted long. No one joked anymore. Not after the first hard freeze came early and cruel. Not after 2 families lost all their preserves to damp rot. Not after Mrs. Harrow's cellar walls caved in. Not after the preacher's wife opened a barrel of salted pork and found it green and crawling, sealed under mold like something forgotten in the sun. Now they mostly watched. Martha wiped her hands on her skirt and stood. The hogs screamed again somewhere down the valley, and she knew whoever owned them would be riding for town before noon, hoping the general store still had something left to sell. She turned toward her cabin, small and plain, built from logs she had hauled and set herself. It was not pretty, but it was tight. The chimney held. The fire pit drew clean, and behind it, hidden in the slope, was the reason she still ate warm meals. She had not built the pantry for pride. She built it the night her husband died. That night, her hand shook too hard to hold the baby, and her chest felt too hollow to cry. Her husband had slipped on frozen mud while setting fence posts, gone down hard, spine broken clean. He died without words, his breath leaving him like steam from cooling earth. By morning, she was alone with a shovel, a patch of trees, and neighbors who smiled too kindly when she passed. She did not go to church much after that. She did not gossip. She did not ask for help. That made people uneasy. Instead, she worked. First the cabin, then the fire pit, then the chimney, half stone and half clay. And when that was done, she started digging. She chose the north side of the slope where the sun barely touched, even in summer. The soil there stayed dark and packed. Cold held steady. For weeks she dug, working late into the evenings by lantern light. Her palms split. Her boots cracked at the soles. When others stayed warm with company, she shoveled quietly while the woods froze around her. She lined the walls with stone, fitting each piece with care. She built a double roof, 1 layer of timber, 1 of clay, then buried it under 2 feet of soil. She carved narrow steps downward and sealed the entrance with a flat stone that rested tight and silent. Inside, she drove hooks into the beams and laid out low racks. Near the back, she placed a stone shelf, meant for butter, if she ever had enough to keep. By the time snow fell, the space was colder than a well, but dry as bone. She stocked it with what little she had: salt pork, turnips, potatoes, a small jar of honey traded from a passing peddler. It was not much, but it was enough. By mid-November, the trouble started elsewhere. The Harrow's beef turned brown, the Peterson apples froze and collapsed into mush. The Sullivans' cornmeal went bitter from damp. Each time someone rode into town before dawn, hoping to buy back what winter had taken. The shelves thinned fast. With the pass blocked and the stage delayed, the general store ran out of most things. What remained was overpriced and nearly useless. Pickled eggs, a few sacks of oats, regret. Martha did not ride to town. She did not need to. When she opened her pantry, the air inside stayed cold and clean. The meat was firm, the roots dry, nothing spoiled, nothing froze solid. She cooked slow meals by her fire, boiled turnips, thin strips of pork, bread made from the last of her flour. When the wind screamed through the trees, she listened, knowing the hogs downhill would not last another week. The first knock came quietly. It was the preacher's wife, standing stiff on the porch with pale knuckles and eyes too wide. She did not beg. She did not cry. She only said the frost had been misjudged and their barrel had failed. She offered a patchwork quilt and a small carved cross. Martha nodded once. She disappeared into the slope and returned with a slab of pork wrapped in dry cloth. The woman stared at it like it was gold. Martha told her to come back in 2 days and closed the door. After that, the laughter stopped. The knocks came more often. Young men, old women, children sent ahead of their parents. Martha gave what she could. She never asked questions and never took more than was fair. Still, no one offered to help her chop wood. No one patched her roof. Gratitude came quietly and left just as fast. That was fine. But hunger does not sit still, and neither does envy. It came first through the eyes of a boy. Eli Harrow was 14, thin and watchful. Since his family's cellar flooded, he had taken to lingering near the trees whenever Martha went out. She noticed him once by the creek, hiding badly behind a pine. "You hungry?" she asked. He vanished without answering. The next week she found tracks near the slope, small boots circling the pantry entrance. More than once, she reinforced the stone lid and began carrying a hatchet at her belt. Not to threaten, just to be ready. 3 days before Christmas, the McIntyre cabin burned. No one knew how it started. By morning, only wet ash remained. Their food went with it. The family crowded into the schoolhouse, thin and shaking. Martha gave butter that night, real butter. She wrapped it carefully and placed it in trembling hands. It was worth more than gold, but she did not hesitate. That was when the whispers began. They said she had more, that she was hiding it, that no pantry should last like that. The word unnatural crept from mouth to mouth, growing sharper with the cold. The blizzard came soon after. Wind screamed down the slope. Snow drove sideways. Trees bent and cracked. Martha was awake, mending mittens, when she heard footsteps. Not one. 3. She did not light the lantern. She took the hatchet and stepped into the storm. They were at the pantry. 2 men and a boy, frozen mid-motion with hands on the stone lid. Eli Harrow stared first. The men were Jacobson and Hall. Martha said nothing. She only slammed the stone shut and told them not to return. They left without a word. The cold deepened after that. Cabins failed. Fires went out. No one knocked any more. Until, one morning, Martha found blood in the snow. The pantry door stood slightly ajar. Nothing was taken, but footprints led away into the woods. Small ones, uneven, bleeding. Martha stared at them a long moment. Then she took her coat, tucked 2 biscuits into her pocket, and followed the trail into the trees, knowing winter was far from finished. The wind cut sharper once Martha stepped into the trees. Out here the snow lay deeper, packed and brittle, creaking under each careful step. The footprints wandered like the mind that made them, too close together, then wide apart, then circling as if the person had stopped, unsure which way to go. Blood dotted the snow at first, then thinned. That worried her more than if it had kept flowing. It meant the cold had started to seal the wound, turning pain dull and dangerous. She followed without calling out. The woods in January were not kind to anyone, least of all a boy. Branches snapped overhead under their own weight. The air burned the lungs if breathed too fast. Even seasoned trappers avoided these paths once winter set its teeth. After half a mile, she saw something caught in a drift. A scarf, brown wool with a thin red edge, hand-sewn. Martha knew it at once. Eli Harrow's. Her jaw tightened. She picked up the pace, boots crunching louder now. The tracks began to drag, one foot sliding more than the other. He was limping. The shelter appeared suddenly. Little more than sticks and brush leaned together, half buried by snow. Smoke drifted weakly from a hollowed stump nearby. Someone was alive inside, barely. "Eli," she called, low but firm. Silence, then a thin cough. "I'm here," she said. "You're not in trouble." The brush moved. Eli crawled out slowly, wrapped in a blanket too thin for this weather. His cheeks were raw and red, lips cracked. One hand was wrapped in cloth, stiff with frozen blood. "I didn't take anything," he said quickly. "I swear." "I know," Martha said. She took his injured hand and peeled back the cloth. The cut was shallow but ugly. Skin split where it had caught on iron. Painful, but not deadly, yet. "You stay out here much longer, you'll lose those fingers," she said. "I can't go back," he whispered. "Why?" He stared at the snow. "They said it was my fault, that I made folks jealous. Pa hit me, told me to fix it, said I should have taken something to prove it was real." Martha closed her eyes once. Then she stood. "You're coming with me." He did not argue. They walked slow. She gave him one biscuit from her pocket and told him to eat without stopping. By the time they reached the cabin, his steps had grown clumsy, his words slurred. Inside, she stripped his wet layers and rubbed his hands until the blood returned and he bit down to keep from crying. She set him in the loft with a blanket and water. "You sleep," she said. "We'll talk later." She slept with her boots on and the hatchet by her bed. For 3 days, Eli barely spoke. On the 4th morning there was a knock. 3 sharp raps. Confident. Martha opened the door just enough to see Jacobson standing there, hat in hand, eyes calm. Too calm. "I heard you might have taken in my boy," he said. "Wife's worried." "You beat him," Martha said. Jacobson smiled thin. "I disciplined him. You sent him to steal." "See," Jacobson said. "Not steal. That's different." She did not move aside. Jacobson glanced toward the slope. "You've got quite a setup back there. Folks are saying you've got more food than the rest of us combined." "I'd give when asked honest." He leaned closer. "We need more than scraps. Half the stores. We forget the boy." "That's fair." She stared at him until his smile twitched. "You come back with others," she said. "You'll leave alone." He laughed once and stepped back. "We'll see." That evening, Martha watched 6 men gather near the old schoolhouse, pride and hunger standing shoulder to shoulder. She had one day. She moved the food that night, down into a space beneath the pantry floor no one but her knew existed. The racks she left empty. She set wires and bells onto the snow, sharpened stakes angled just enough to tear boots. Eli helped without question. When the storm hit again, the bells rang. Martha hid Eli beneath the floor just as a soft knock came at the door. "Miss Martha," a woman's voice said, "please." It was Mrs. Peterson, children clinging to her skirts. Martha let them in. The crash came from the slope moments later. She ran outside with the lantern blazing. Jacobson and the others were there. Stone lid pried open, finding nothing. Confusion turned to anger. Then the trap sprang. Fire flared, smoke billowed, and Jacobson screamed as his coat caught. Panic scattered them into the trees. Martha did not chase. For a week no one came. Then winter tightened further, and the valley began to change. Cabins emptied. Fires went cold. Jacobson and the Harrows vanished south, leaving their shame behind. Those who remained came quieter now, not to demand, but to learn. And Martha, who had once dug alone, began to teach. The valley did not recover all at once. Winter never allowed that. It loosened its grip slowly, one hard day at a time, testing what remained and taking what could not endure. After Jacobson and the Harrows left, the silence felt different. It was no longer the quiet of fear. It was the quiet of people watching and thinking. Martha noticed it first in the smoke. More chimneys burned now, not strong but steady. Fires were smaller, tended carefully. No one wasted fuel anymore. Folks learned fast when hunger had already taught them once. They came to her in daylight now, not knocking at dusk, not whispering. They walked up the path openly and stood straight when they spoke. Mrs. Trudy came first, her back bent from years of cold classrooms and poor shoes. Then a trapper with frostbitten fingers who could no longer hold a rifle steady. Then a young mother with twins bundled so tight only their eyes showed. They did not ask for food. They asked how. Martha took them to the slope and showed them the stonework. They were part of the merchant, and they were tucked and added. She pointed out the angle of the ceiling, The way the vent holes were placed, high and low, never straight through. She showed them the floor, stone not clay, so damp never had a place to live. Never too deep, she said. Never too shallow. You want the cold to hold steady, not bite. They listened. Eli stood beside her, quiet, watching. He did not speak unless asked, but when he did, his words were careful. He showed them how to fit stones tight, how to test for airflow using a candle flame, how to slope soil so meltwater ran away. He had not gone back to his father. No one asked when he would. By February, 2 new pantries were finished. By March, there were 5. They were not perfect, but they worked. Food kept. Mold stayed away. No one lost everything again. Spring came thin and late. Snow lingered in the trees, but the sun climbed higher. The ground softened enough to dig without splitting skin. When the creek thawed, Martha stood at its edge and watched the water move again, dark and patient. She felt older than she had the year before, not weaker, just settled. One evening, as the frost finally began to loosen, Eli brought her something wrapped in canvas. He handed it over without a word. Inside was a drawing. It was rough, done in charcoal and boot polish, but careful. A cabin, a slope, a woman standing beside a boy, both holding lanterns against a dark sky. Behind them were shapes of others, faint but present, carrying baskets. At the bottom, written slow and crooked, were the words, "She dug down so we could rise." Martha folded the drawing and placed it behind the pantry wall, between 2 stones. She sealed it there, not to hide it, but to keep it safe. By summer, more people arrived, not crowds, just a few at a time. 2 widows, a man with 1 eye and a wagon full of broken tools, a woman who could stack stone better than most men. They did not build close. Space mattered. Respect mattered. No one mocked anymore. They worked. A communal fire pit took shape near the center of the cabins. Nothing fancy, just stones and shared effort. Children ran trails where wolves once did. Laughter returned, quieter than before but real. They did not call it a town. No sign marked the place, but travelers began to speak of it, a valley where winter did not take everything. That fall, before the first snow, Eli finished another pantry. This one was larger, built with help. 2 families could store their winter there. Martha tested the door herself. It sealed tight. "It'll hold," she said. Eli smiled, not like a boy, and not like a man trying to prove something. Just someone who knew he had built something that mattered. The first snow came light that year. A warning, not a threat. The pantries were ready. So were the people. They had jars and hooks and clay, butter crocks and vent holes, shelves set at the right height. They had learned. And when winter returned in full, it found them waiting. They still lost things. A goat to sickness, a roof to heavy ice. Winter always took something, but no one starved. No child was sent into the woods alone. On the longest night, they held a shared meal. Everything on the table had been preserved. Dried meat, pickled roots, smoked fish. No fresh harvest yet, but life held over. Martha sat near the fire and ate without asking what was on her plate. It tasted like survival. Later, when the fire burned low and the wind pressed against the dark, someone asked her why she had started digging in the first place. She thought of her husband, of the child she buried alone, of the night she chose earth over despair. "I didn't trust the winter," she said simply, "so I prepared for it." No one laughed. They understood now. And when the hogs screamed again the next year, somewhere down the valley, the sound no longer meant panic. It meant someone else would learn. Dig deep, build right, and never wait for permission to survive.